the Premier's green commitment to require significant additional Crown lands. The Honourable, the Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, what a joy it is to be able to rise and speak to this motion this afternoon. It has been quite an extraordinary year for Crown land acquisitions in Nova Scotia, and very pleased to stand today and speak about some of these recent land acquisitions. But, Mr. Speaker, I think we have to recognize that $35 million worth of land acquisitions for a province of Nova Scotia size just does not happen by accident. And I would like to acknowledge what I see as the three key criteria that had to come together to make this possible. First of all, Premiers Ham and now MacDonald have run a very tight fiscal ship. And as a result of that, the province has found itself in a position where it can make somewhat discretionary purchases, very important purchases, but still it was up to the discretion of the premiers. If it was not for Premier Ham's fiscal stewardship of the environment along with his ministers of finances, we would never have had the very significant surplus that we had in 2005-2006, which not only allowed us to meet our debt management plan targets, but in fact to exceed them. Premier MacDonald, as I have said before in this chamber, very early on indicated the importance of greening this province. Traditionally, when people run for leadership, you would often hear health, education, perhaps roads or infrastructure. Somewhere in the background there would be a mention of environment. That was not the case with Premier MacDonald, and perhaps it's the generational change, but I think it's fair to say that by making the environment one of his four pillars, he has certainly set the tone for his premiership. And so following through on that commitment, and to also recognize Minister Baker, who recognized that window of opportunity as a result of exceeding our debt management plan targets for 2005-2006, allowed us to make these very significant incremental strategic investments in Crown land acquisitions while still not only meeting the debt management plan but exceeding those targets. So there was a balance, and under the leadership of the Premier and those other people that I mentioned in this preamble, this is how we got to where we are today. And I would tell you that the message I'm getting from Nova Scotians right throughout the province is that they do want to have better access to coastal properties, environmental protection. This is important to them. And this year, the government seized that opportunity to dramatically improve our Crown land holdings in those areas. The Department of Natural Resources has worked closely with a number of landowners, and the most significant of the corporate ones would be Bowater Mersey Paper Company and the George Eddy Company. Bowater Mersey is a very large landholder in western Nova Scotia, and interestingly enough, they were perhaps ahead of the curve because as far as 40 years ago, they recognized the importance of setting aside some of their land for conservation. In fact, 13% of their holdings, a very significant number, and it's interesting how close it corresponds with our own target of 12% protected wilderness areas for the province. And they did this on their own because they were good corporate citizens. And it's a great pleasure to be able to take responsibility for some of those fabulous properties into the Crown land base. Also the George Eddy Company, which has properties along the St. Mary's River, and again, very significant ecological acquisitions. And I want to say that the companies, I think, have certainly been fair with the taxpayer. At a maximum, we paid full appraised value, and in some cases, we were even able to acquire for less than that amount, which is a tremendous reflection on them. Also, community organizations like the Mahone Island Conservation Association, commonly known as MICA, that's of course in Lunenburg County, and St. Margaret's Bay Stewardship Association. Both of these organizations care passionately about acquiring some of the islands and coastal properties in Lunenburg County for conservation and to increase the Crown land base. And they didn't just come to government and say, we'd like you to purchase these islands or these properties. They came with their wallets that were filled by the community, and to a very significant extent. So it was a great pleasure to be able to partner with them to cover over the difference between the appraised market value, oftentimes reduced by the seller, to cover that gap and make those purchases possible. I would also like to recognize our partners, the Nova Scotia Nature Trust. We are working with them again to expand efforts to encourage and educate Nova Scotians about ways that they can protect private properties that support areas of ecological diversity, such as wildlife habitat for rare and endangered species, and the coastal culture we treasure here in Nova Scotia. The arrangement there is basically a matching one for every dollar from the Department of Natural Resources. They match it with $1. So it leverages those monies, and plus they bring an expertise and a familiarity close to the community that I think that can only come from such an organization. Very pleased that in February we were able to announce the acquisition of a number of properties. This is not news, but I think it bears being put into context. 699 hectares of prime Nova Scotia property, including islands in Mahone Bay and the St. Margaret's Bay, Lunenburg County. North Harbour in Victoria County, which, amongst other things, has a heron and tern colony. And parcels of land in Guysborough and Queens County, including the McGowan's Lake, which is an overwintering spot for the endangered Blandings turtle. All this for recreation and tourism opportunities, coastal access, inland waterways, and wildlife habitat. Something valued by all Nova Scotians. Now, Mr. Speaker, a few years ago, we made a purchase of Cape Split. But as part of that purchase, there was still an access problem, and because of the benevolence of the landowners that own the property between Cape Split and the parking lot, people were able to access it for hiking. It's a lovely spot. Anybody that's not made that hike, I would certainly encourage them to consider it this summer. And as a result of some purchases in that area, we have now secured the access. So it is now Crown land, and we certainly appreciate the community, the landowners that allowed that access to continue until we are able to make these purchases this spring. So there's 364 hectares, 147 hectares at Cape Split, and 17 hectares in Inner Sambro Island off of HRM, which was announced last week. The Bowater Mersey purchases was over 10,000 hectares. That moves us from about 8 to 9%. If the majority of that goes to protected wilderness areas and nature preserves, a very significant improvement. In fact, just to wrap up, Mr. Speaker, because there's a lot more that I could say, but I want to get it on the record that this government has purchased more Crown land in 2006, 2007 than all governments before it for the last decade. So I think that this is a move in the right direction. It's not something we're going to be able to do every year, but what a pleasure it has been to do it this year, and I want to commend all the hard work of the many people that made this happen, and I'm going to identify Joanne Himmelman, who's my Director of Land in the department that's held on behalf of the people in Nova Scotia for her outstanding contribution and that of her staff. And Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak of these exciting developments.
Thank you.
This evening.
The honourable member for Pictou-Heath.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure for me to rise tonight to speak in relationship to the late night debate subject. I think, Mr. Speaker, that we have to begin by giving a bouquet to the minister for some of the work that he has been doing in relationship to the acquisition of land. Now, this is perhaps very unusual because I did in fact give him a little bit of a bouquet earlier in the day in relationship to the off-highway vehicle situation. And that is in contrast to what I would have done last week or the month before or the month before that, because there was very, very poor communication in relationship to the whole ATV situation, the off-highway vehicle situation. However, his work today in regards to that is in fact good. Having said that, and recognizing some of the recent acquisitions that have in fact taken place, I want to say that it will be much more of a joy. The minister spoke of what a joy it was for him to stand today. I would say it will be a much greater joy when he stands in this House and says that the goal of 12% has in fact been reached. I want to have a look at a little bit of the history behind trying to get to 12%. And this actually came from the 1992 Earth Summit in Rio, when Jean Charest, then Federal Minister of the Environment, set a goal of 12% of each province's territory as part of a network of protected areas. Now, where are we in relationship to that 12%? You know, I almost look at the opposite, at the government as those opposite from here, as almost being magicians in one respect. It seems that they have tried to take that conservative blue and they've done a dip, 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 and they try to haul it out as being green, and it definitely will not work. The magicians on the other side are not capable of doing that. This situation is one where leadership has been shown by another party for decades in this province. We are, in this official opposition, not adopting something green. We have been green for decades. Now, where do we fit in relationship to the rest of Canada on this matter of trying to reach 12%? None of it is 13.6%, but we have to say it's very much like Greenland, which is one of the highest areas or has one of the highest areas in the world, because much of it has no population and a lot of it is ice and snow and areas where no people exist. So looking at the provinces of Canada, where are we? We are British Columbia, 12.5%. Now, how did British Columbia get to 12.5%? Well, that's easy. The headline: NDP doubles protected land in British Columbia. The BC government has added a huge piece of land, twice the size of Vancouver Island, to its protected areas list. It includes 600,000 hectares of newly protected areas in northeastern BC, including the Laird River Corridor and the Muncho Lake Park. In making the announcement, the NDP Premier of the day said, "The addition of the new land fulfills the NDP promise to protect 12% of BC's land base. This plan creates 10 new protected areas in northern British Columbia, totaling about 2/3 of 1,000,000 hectares, he says. That's about the size of Banff National Park. The land use agreement took 8 years to negotiate, involving environmentalists, Aboriginal groups, and the forest industry. Next to British Columbia, we have the right-wing government of Alberta for some reason, with 12.4%, the Yukon with 11.1%, the Northwest Territories 10.8%, Ontario 8.7%, the Canadian average 8.6%, Manitoba 8.4%, Nova Scotia 8.4%, 8.3%, somewhere in there, Saskatchewan 8%, and then New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, and Quebec, Newfoundland are way behind, Newfoundland and Labrador. So we are doing something right. We are moving in the right direction. We're a little below the middle of the pack, but we are making some improvements. One of the concerns that I have is in relationship to the degrees of protection. The province of Quebec has 22 classifications of protection. So I asked the minister how many classifications exist in Nova Scotia. Because when we look at some of the information in relationship to areas that are strictly protected and the total area protected, and that comparison, the most recent was 2001, we have a strictly protected percentage of 6.32, and the area of protection, to some degree, of 10.45%. So you see there is quite a contrast in what is strictly protected and what is just protected. So I think that's something that we have to address, and address early on in this province. Now, what I want to do is look at some of the situations. One of the things the minister said, and I want to deal with this first, is that the minister talked about the ability to do this because of the fiscal restraints of the Ham government and the fiscal restraints of the MacDonald government. And I certainly agree with what is said in relationship to the Ham government, but certainly to date we have not seen in that last year those fiscal restraints to be so excited about, though with what has befallen us in the last day or so, we certainly may be facing some serious restraints with the cousins, the Ottawa cousins of the Conservatives here in the province, pulling the rug out from under the province of Nova Scotia. And I certainly take great exception to that. So where are we in Nova Scotia? When we look at northern Nova Scotia, the area that I represent in Pictou East, there is no protected area whatsoever. And it's interesting to note that the Ham government did in fact bring in the first area in Pictou County, and it spans, the largest chunk of it is in fact in Colchester County, but there is a small portion of that which we really appreciated at the time in Pictou County. And there was nothing in Atikonish County until the Egg Mountain scenario. But for the minister to put forward a debate subject, be it resolved that all MLAs in this House of Assembly acknowledge government has honored the Premier's green commitment to require significant additional Crown lands. I find that to be very self-congratulatory, self-serving, a pat on my back type of late-night debate. Now, I want to end by saying that to achieve the 12% goal in Nova Scotia, we, in fact, need 55 more Gully Lakes. Gully Lake is about 4,000, less than 4,000 hectares, and we need far over 200,000 more hectares.
Order, please. The honourable member's time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and certainly pleased today to join the minister and the member opposite in the debate, because that's what we're supposed to have here is an exchange of ideas and a laying out of some areas that yes, government is moving in the right direction, but also there are a number of significant deficiencies that we do need to talk about. But first of all, you know, the Premier in his leadership campaign and in the election of 2006 did talk about a greener Nova Scotia, a more sustainable environment, and there were to be a number of steps taken to achieve that. And one of them, of course, was to protect more green space for future generations of Nova Scotians. And certainly the purchases over the past number of months have raised the percentage at least a couple of decimal points, not a full percentage yet, but as I say, it's moving in the right direction. I think the minister did reference the most land purchased in a decade. I would have to go back and check. In 1997, under Liberal government, Nova Scotia unveiled a protected areas strategy, and of course that was the time in which the minister of the day, Minister of Natural Resources, Don Down, protected 31 areas in Nova Scotia. In fact, it is the most signature and landmark occasion in the history of preserving land in Nova Scotia outside of the national park system. And it is on that we do need to build. And that we did have some period of time there in which very, very little, in fact, was accomplished, and now we've started to move forward again. And I certainly hope this path and this approach will go forward, because you know, the goal of 12%. And a member opposite mentioned that Rio, the summit at Rio, which was really somewhat of I think an alternate. There was both an alternate and a major world conference there, and out of Rio, actually, along with Canada's commitment of 12% from the Minister of the Day, there was actually a Nova Scotia commitment that was made at that time. And it was the provincial government committed to protect wilderness lands in each of Nova Scotia's 80 natural landscape by the year 2000. Now, again, I mean, it's always you know, worthy to note that was certainly a major goal. It certainly has not, you know, been achieved, but that to me would be our target of where we should be aiming for, is to have the 12% and to have a network across Nova Scotia that would have some land preserved in the 80 natural places. And that's why when some people I did have a few emails which said, well, you know, they're buying a couple of islands off the South Shore and off Cape Breton and some lands that Bowater will turn over to the province. They're not really that significant. But I took the opposite point of view, and I said, yes, they are significant, because it is when you have archaeological sites that should be preserved, when you have very rare species, when you have animals like the Blanding's turtle that are still on the endangered list. Well, those areas, even though they are small, they're significant in the big scheme of things, and this is why protecting some land in our 80 natural landscapes is an ideal that we should continue to strive for in this province. In terms, I guess, of the greatest deficiency that I have come to realize, and that has been brought to my attention on a number of occasions, but certainly reached the critical point was last year when we saw that some of our wilderness area, our protected space, was being clear-cut. And we still have this going on. In fact, we'll have a major area in Chignecto that has been granted the approval for clear cutting. So I am really concerned about what we have designated as wilderness areas, but yet we don't give it that full restrictive measure. In fact, the member opposite talked about British Columbia having a hierarchy of protections, and I absolutely believe that if we're going to designate lands as wilderness area, we hold on to them in the most pristine manner in which we can, and we work, in fact, to recovery of some of those areas that, in fact, have been impacted by the logging industry over a number of generations. And to see that practice happen in our wilderness areas today, I think is indeed unacceptable, and Nova Scotians are starting to speak pretty loud and clear about that. And certainly just a year ago, I was very disturbed in this House when the Minister of the day, the Minister of Natural Resources, this is from February 23rd, 2006, clear cutting in wildlife management areas will continue despite calls for better habitat protection, the Provincial Natural Resources Department said Wednesday. My hope is that during this session with the Minister, giving his government, a slap on the back, but I do also give kudos for what has been done. But I'm hoping this Minister will make a clear departure and put an environmental footprint on what we have established here in this province as pieces of wilderness and of the wild that need to be protected for generations to come. And I'll just end off with one of the species of animal that in central Newfoundland I came to appreciate from a very early childhood, from both its majestic presence to, of course, its life-preserving protein that it provided, and that was the moose. And if the mainland moose is going to make a recovery in Nova Scotia, we have to protect its habitat. And some of that habitat is still under immense pressure. And if we went to Liscombe today, we would not like what we would see. If we were to fly over that sanctuary today, no Nova Scotian, the enlightened people at Natural Resources, or the average Nova Scotian would not like what they see. There in fact is the pressures of harvesting there that are impacting on what should be one of our protected and preserved areas, and some of those commitments that we have made are limited in their nature. And I think the green commitment is falling short if our game sanctuaries are not the great habitat that they should be. So pleased with some progress, but certainly I think we have a ways to go. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I want to thank all the Alderman members for having taken part in tonight's late debate. The motion for adjournment has already been made. The House stands adjourned until 2 p.m. tomorrow afternoon.